So exciting. Hello, everybody. Hello and welcome to Creative Producers International, an event to launch the final report after 3 years of an incredible programme of work spanning 5 different continents. My name's Claire Doherty. I'm really pleased to be chairing this event. It's a complete privilege. And I know that there's hundreds of people joining from all over the place. So it's great to see you. And I hope wherever you are today, that the sun is shining and things are stable. Just a few housekeeping tips on today's event. We love to hear who you are and where you are in the chat. You need to sign in to YouTube in order to participate in the chat. And we'll be keeping an eye on that as the event goes along. We're going to be hearing from Claire Reddington, CEO of Watershed, about the programme, and then from 3 of the creative producers that took part in the programme, really reflecting on their amazing experience as part of it. And then we'll hear from John Dovey, one of the writers of the report, on hearing on some of the findings and insights that were coming out of this important programme and thoughts about how that might affect our work in the future. There'll be a brilliant opportunity for you to then network, and you need for that to keep an eye on the link that was sent to you in an email that allows you to network with others. And we'll then come back for a discussion and a Q&A. And so if you've got particular questions that are coming up for you as this event is going on, you need to post them in the YouTube chat with the word question, so that we can keep an eye on the thoughts and ideas that are emerging as you're witnessing what's going on this afternoon. So thanks so much for you all joining. I can see some amazing places coming down in the chat with us here. And first of all, I'm going to go to Claire Reddington, CEO of Watershed, who's going to introduce the programme to you.
Hi everyone, welcome from the Pervasive Media Studio, which I'm delighted that Watershed has opened in the last couple of days. So I'm able to be in the home of Creative Producers International to talk to you about the programme. But before I do that, and I talk a bit about what we're trying to do today and what we want to share with you, I'm going to play a video that captures some of the magic, some of the people, and some of the activity that we undertook in the programme. So here it is.
It's been really hard at times and very challenging, and it's taken me to places physically and mentally that probably I wasn't prepared for. It's easy to make assumptions about how the world works without actually going to visit the places that you're making assumptions about working in, and to place a lot of your own bias and privilege into those environments from afar and from within when you're here. So I think a broadened horizon is something I definitely will take away from this, and a kind of sense of new possibilities.
I am feeling very emotional because it's been an intense week. But yeah, I think I'm feeling also very ready for the next year, and I think this week helped us to solidify the relations that we created or started last year, and this was just this quick reminder that we are there for each other and that we can actually just go like, hey, how are you? And it's just like-minded people.
With this group, we can be honest, you know. We can talk about real story, real emotion, real feeling, and real learning from those good or bad experiences.
City change has always been for me something big. It's like, oh, I need to change and address all these problems that we have. What I am taking from this is city change is not macro, it is micro. And it means do it when you can, observe it, and if it works, move it to the next step. If it doesn't work, try something else, but just keep doing and doing. And that's what I understand about city change from this experience.
I think that this cohort will go well beyond the end of the programme, and I'm already really excited about 5 years and 10 years from now when we're in different parts of the world and sending the selfies to the group that still exists and talking about the projects we're making together, because I think that's definitely going to happen.
Oh, watching the video and reading the report has made me pretty emotional today about all of the amazing people we worked with. And thanks to John Aitken, who went with us throughout the whole process of Creative Producers International to document the programme. So we're told often that more than half of the world's population live in cities. Everyone says that how cities grow, adapt and thrive is the key issue of the age. But conversations around future city are still focused on policy and technology, not people and culture. City policy is still made by wealthy elders in stifling suits. We still favour efficiency of infrastructure over equality of access, policing over permission. We know that artists and cultural organisations can play a unique role in reimagining this. We know that citizens across the world are demanding long overdue change around things like structural racism and environmental sustainability. We believe that the creative producer sits at the heart of capitalising on this possibility for change. So 4 years ago, we began an ambitious journey to create an international talent development programme to champion this. Building on Watershed's Playable City network, we curated 15 incredible leaders from across contemporary art, placemaking, community engagement, corporate collaboration, urban innovation, and social activism. And we set out to learn and to make change together. We asked questions about identity, public space, privilege, play, value, and impact. Our aim was to form a network and amplify connected practice, to build an international bank of knowledge and experience around city change, to produce work together that would test and shape the thinking. And while, of course, stats don't tell the whole story, they do perhaps give a flavour of it. Our 15 creative producers worked with 66 artists. They delivered 7 artistic commissions, and they reached audiences of just under 300,000. We ran 2 major conferences in 2 different continents, and we worked with Fred Deacon, who I know is on the chat today, on a new model of digital collaboration that I can tell you has become extremely useful in the past couple of months. Maybe though, the KPI that I best believe in, or the thing that gives best testament to the programme, is are we still collaborating? And we are. Are we still in touch? The creativity of the gift game on the WhatsApp group and the testament and the way that the group continue to support each other is testament, I think, to the programme's success. So I'd like to say some thank yous. I'd like to thank Arts Council England very much. Their Ambition for Excellence scheme really provoked us to think differently, to think bigger than we'd ever been able to before. I'd like to thank our partners, British Council, UE Bristol, Manchester International Festival, the RSC, Rhizomatics, Situations, Somerset House, Unlimited, Future Lagos, and the Laboratorio Palestiadad for going with us on an incredible journey. How amazing to have those partners from around the world to work with, to ask us questions, to support us. And also, of course, thanks to the Watershed team, who shepherded the participants with such incredible care and kindness, especially to Pete Vance, who's the lead producer on the scheme. But most of all, of course, and I'm delighted that I'm on a call with some of them today, thank you to our creative producers who stepped up to the challenge and who continue to amaze us with their generosity and brilliance. Here are their lovely faces. I'm going to ask all of them to say hi in the chat, as sadly we can't get to meet all of them personally today. Their patience, trust, provocation, vulnerability, and wisdom shaped this programme to be what it was. We've learned so much from the journey with them. Our shared journey and their international perspectives, particularly for me around privilege and public space, has changed Watershed and Playable City forever. We obviously didn't imagine we'd be releasing this report in a time of global lockdown, where the values that sit at the heart of the work are so constrained and yet so vital. And to be honest, it fills me with real sadness. that, like many of you, Watershed is struggling to find its feet. We are reopened, but we're vulnerable. This project is one of the most important things we've ever done. And yet today I'm struggling to give it brain space. I can't really celebrate it like I want to. I can't give you a clear answer on what is next. I know that without this project, we wouldn't have been nearly as ready for digital delivery and online facilitation as we were. And I know that it points the way to how we might understand international collaboration in the future. Since the report has been finished, it's benefited us in many numerous ways. So today we'll share a bit of what we've learned, some of what we knew, and some of what we are excited for next. It is a dense report, and we're going to make no apologies for that. We learned a lot, and one of the things we really wanted to do was to codify and share our approach in a way that would be useful to others, to use our public funding responsibly, to create a commons. So as well as the thoughts and the methodologies, you'll find toolkits, practical approaches to running a digital lab, to self-care, facilitation. If they're useful to you, we'd love to know how you use them and how you change and add to them. As our cities reopen and we reassess what's important, it's clear the human desire to be together in public space will be more important than ever. And we're going to need our creative producers to shape and to stitch, to poke and to guard the desire for change. Thank you.
Thank you, Claire, so much. It's a real reminder of hope, actually, and the need to have our localities connected. And I think Creative Producers International is the template for the future in that sense. So it's really exciting to hear that summary in that moment and what it's meant for Watershed. We're now going to come on to our three brilliant creative producers to shed light on what their experience was. And I want first to come to Leti Lozano. Leti is speaking to us from Mexico City. Leti, over to you. Just unmute.
Hello, everyone. My name is Leticia Lozano, and I am a creative producer based in Mexico City. I have a background in architecture and narrative environments, and my training is the result of a strong curiosity around the impact that spaces and objects have on human interactions. Do they encourage them or do they dissuade them? Throughout the years, I have come to understand that this simple question can be divided into layers of complexity, and it also depends on the context you're applying the question to. But I believe that question is what led me to become a creative producer. Even without knowing, I was transforming into one. Because a creative producer comes from different backgrounds, works in different disciplines, and has different methodologies. But we all have one thing in common. We think in systems. And like my question, since systems can be divided into layers of complexity. From my perspective, a creative producer is capable of designing and understanding a project through all its layers, from conception to implementation. This doesn't mean that we are know-alls. It just means we are solvers and that we will try even our health out to make things happen. Not that I recommend jeopardizing your health. On our first CPI lab in Bristol, the lead creative producer of a play that was supposed to happen in public space shared with us the series of unfortunate events that led him to stand on stage on opening night to tell the audience that the show was canceled. I remember it because while I was listening to the anecdote, I could feel in my own skin the pain and anguish that this creative producer had experienced. We can all relate to those moments. It is to that extent that we will try to solve things. It is not that we're oblivious about the things that can go wrong. It is that we will remain positive under unthinkable situations and tons of pressure. To me, that just speaks about the amazing flexibility and resilience of a creative producer, because it doesn't stop until not even your own hands can solve it. And I am not just throwing praises. I've heard crazy stories from the cohort, from making thousands of tiny clay bells to be chimed at a public square, or stopping traffic in the middle of the night on a 5-lane avenue to paint a safe pedestrian crossroad, and even their police officers by assembling people to dialogue while playing in a public square. But all those crazy stories have common threads. They were tackling urban challenges, they were related to spaces and objects impacting human interactions, and they were creating experiences and shaping memories for other humans. The three-year experience of being part of the CPI was a production in itself. The Watershed and the Pervasive Media Studio were creatively producing the creative producers. And because of that, the 15 of us were influencing and learning from each other, not just methodologies and strategies, but perspectives, cultures, and privileges. Because it is not the same to be a creative producer in a context where people know or roughly know what is the added value of a creative producer to the extent that it is a career path, a job description, and maybe has a pay chart, than to be one in a context where no one knows what you do. And you have to explain it by saying, well, I did a concept and can assemble a team and can be a leader and can supervise the implementation of the project, etc., etc. But the CPI experience helped me appreciate that the lack of definition also means there is room for innovation. That liminal space has allowed me to approach projects and research regarding play, public space, human interactions, and behavior design from different sectors. I started from academia and activism, transitioned to fighting from within Mexico City's government as part of the first innovation lab in Latin America. And almost 2 years ago, I co-founded Masia Studio, an architecture studio dedicated to creating play and child-friendly environments. Because in a city where children have been systematically erased from public life and a special injustice dominates the streets, constructing public space through participatory design processes with children and communities becomes a political statement and a protest in itself. A big part of the decision to be independent was this program, and each and every person I had the joy to meet through it. They all helped me understand that I needed to trust my unique set of skills, leave my imposter syndrome aside, and continue pursuing the change I want for Mexico City. Because even under the current circumstances of the world, it is the transversality of the child-friendly and playful approach that has the potential to unite different agendas and power new paradigms around education, planning, spatial justice, and urban innovation. Thank you.
Letty, thank you so much. A great, yeah, everybody on the I can see it are saying a brilliant piece, and such a great journey that you described there. That legitimizing, I think, is really exciting to hear what the value that the program gave you. Kate Stewart, we're coming to you next. Kate is from the organisation We Make Places in Liverpool. Delighted to see you here today. Kate, over to you.
Thank you, Claire, and thank you, Letty. Hello, everybody. So I'm Kate, and I'm a creative producer based in Liverpool in the UK. I'm co-founder of a social enterprise called We Make Places, and I've now become the CEO of that organisation. And the work that we do is to support individuals and help them to increase their self-confidence and their skill base. And we think that by doing that and working with individuals and communities, we're building more resilient communities. Our purpose is to give people stronger voices about what happens in the places and the spaces within their neighbourhoods. We use creative and playful processes, and we focus on co-production and making skills. So we believe that it's citizens that should make places and make decisions about them. We don't think it's something that should be left to planners or politicians, etc., or even architects. And we're a group of people that come from the architecture and design background. So we just think things should be done a little bit differently. Basically, we're creative producers, and we didn't know that. And I didn't know that. And like most creatives, I suffer from quite badly from imposter syndrome. And I was just started my journey with CPI being absolutely astonished to be chosen to take part in it. I often struggled to label myself using any words like creative or like artist, and I had no knowledge of the term of creative producer, which is very similar to how I found most of us at the start of the programme. Weirdly, I say that, having come from a background as being a producer and an artistic director, working in theatre, working in political and also musical theatre. And just before I joined the programme, I'd been the creative director of a large external arts programme, outdoor arts programme called Flyover Takeover. So I'd worked on a 4-month programme of activities and performances and installations and outdoor exhibitions. I'd worked with 92 artists, a live audience of about 10,000, participants of about 5,500, a reach of about 35,000. But I still didn't think I was a creative producer. The takeaway from that event for me, the most important part of that event for me, was that we managed to put a life-size giraffe puppet onto a flyover, so an elevated roadway, 25 metres above the city of Liverpool. And we did that because the year before, a little girl had asked us, had said to us that actually her dream for the city was for there to be a zoo on the flyover. And that for me really embraces and sort of demonstrates how we are working every day to listen to what people want for their cities and actually trying to influence and make that happen. So the changes that I want to see with my work are definitely that I think that citizens' voices should be heard and that they should be the drivers for change. And I think that it's about finding a way to help people who've never been listened to before find their voice and develop their own identity whilst doing it. And I would say that the biggest part of my creative toolkit is probably this. It's my cup of tea and it's listening. And I guess that's perhaps why I've always struggled with the term creative producer, because it is to me just being a human being. The starting point for our journey on all of our projects and the residents that we work with is just listening to people, to understanding their situation. Some of the projects that we've been involved in recently include work on a housing estate, a council housing estate, which was due for investment and some physical change and improvement. And whilst our initial contract was to support the council on their process of engaging and informing people what was going to happen, actually what we discovered when we started to embed ourselves in the community was that there was real high level of social isolation and very, very poor mental health. So in response, we basically took over an empty property, and we turned that empty flat on the estate into a conversation space, which was for the local people to actually move into, if you like, to actually occupy a bit of a space that traditionally had not been theirs, to get to know each other. We would hold drop-in sessions, local history sessions. We turned it into a pop-up making workshop. And that was a particularly successful programme where we got men in the community, like men in their 50s, who'd never spoken to each other, who actually would acknowledge, I've just walked past you every day in the street and I've never known your name. I passed you in the landing on the way to my flat and I don't know who you are. But these guys actually joined forces together and started making things, learning new skills, but also just starting on their journey and their conversation about taking some pride in their neighbourhood and creating delightful little interventions in the spaces and places out and about and around it. So developing their new friendship, but in that collectively finding a new voice in which they could engage with the council and say what they wanted to happen locally. So for our projects, we tend to treat them like residencies. We like to move in. We don't like to hit and run. We like the concept of taking over spaces and reappropriating them for community use. And it's a really successful strategy, to the point that recently in another project in the city centre where we did something similar, the developer has now actually added into the project the intention to build a new indoor space that is given to the community and can continue this work, and the community can do the activities that they want to within that location. So now I think I have an understanding that perhaps I am a creative producer, and I have an understanding of what I think it can achieve. And I'd like to thank Watershed and all of my CPI colleagues on that journey. I think being a creative producer is really important to changing people's lives. A phrase that we use at the minute is we like to refer to our team, and our team includes lots of creative freelancers. We call ourselves the real estate agents. And that plays on the concept of the regeneration and gentrification that's happening in some of the neighbourhoods in which we work. But it also plays to the context of agency and the opportunity to co-create change. I think that in a post-COVID world, as Claire has mentioned, that our role is way more important than it was before. And I think that I hope that people are starting to realise the skills and the talent that having the problem solvers, the radical thinkers, the creative producers on board, gives an opportunity for change to happen quite rapidly in neighbourhoods and for care to happen. And it's with that in mind that we recently launched our social emergency plan. So in March this year, when all of our large scale events were taken off us and we couldn't deliver them in the way that we were used to, we developed a social emergency plan which has the intention to feed the mind and the body and the spirit and to provide healing through collective and individual wellbeing opportunities, to encourage people to collaborate with their neighbours and artists and to find the creativity in each other, and to inform each other and our neighbours and our communities and our peers through continuous loops of conversation that are actually now both analogue and digital. And that's quite challenging for us because we work in neighbourhoods where digital access is really, really limited. So our toolkit has changed a little bit in the recent times, but I think that our purpose is still really strong, and it's about ensuring that individuals have the ability to improve their self-confidence, their skills, to find their latent creativity, and to find their collective voice as communities to bring about the changes that they want to see. And for that, I thank CPI and my cohort, the cohort.
Kate, thank you so much for that brilliant summary. You're so right about the resilience and the role of the creative producer in this moment. I see that so strongly. We're going to attempt to go to Malaika Toyo, who is speaking from Lagos. Lagos traffic being what it is, Malaika is doesn't sound like she is. So we'll come back to her very shortly for her view on this. So we're going to go straight to Economy Lab of UWE Bristol, and is going to talk to us about some of the insights and research findings on this programme. Over to you, John. You're on mute, I think, John.
Just to start in the traditional Zoom meeting way with you're on mute, John. Thank you very much, Claire. I'm very privileged to be part of a university research team that works very closely with and indeed inside Watershed. So we've been on this journey from the beginning with the Creative Producers International Programme as, I suppose, participant observers. We were there, we ran workshops, we did lots of observation, we took lots of notes, and we also conducted a whole bunch of interviews with the cohort in order to try to do some work thinking about how we could share insights from this programme with a wider community, which is what you'll find in the report, which is online as of today. I urge you to download it. It is, as Claire Reddington said at the beginning, jam-packed with goodies. It's like one of those great books you get at Christmas if you're a kid and you were lucky enough to get kids that had things to do, really good reads, some things you could learn from. So it's a really great mixture of stuff. And I want to thank my co-authors in the production of that, especially because actually myself, I only had quite a limited role in shaping the whole output, and Pete Vance, the lead producer on the programme, and Simon Morton, the research fellow that works with me in my unit, together with Georgina Bolton and Joe Lansdowne and the editor Alice Quigley, did actually lots more of the work than I did. But what I want to talk to you about in my little bit of time on this call today is really this idea of creative producer and where it's coming from and why it's useful in the first place. I think we've already heard from Letty and Kate, you know, that there's some really distinct overlaps in the kinds of practices that they were describing. And we're trying to identify, well, what's the common space? If there is this thing called a creative producer that's different to a producer in television or radio or film or theatre or any other spaces that producers work in, what is this new space of the creative producer and why is it a useful idea? And as soon as we started to talk to the producers, well, the variation in their practice was massive. I mean, across the world and in wildly different contexts. They work in theatre, urban design, contemporary art curation, technology, community development, writing, music and audiovisual production, experience design. So it's quite hard to work out what's the common space that all these people have. And then when we began to drill down into that, there was even more difference revealed because of the global context, differential tensions, different practices, contrasting goals, massively different resources, challenges, scales, all articulated on a scale of global inequality that meant that the program itself was being changed by that dynamic, as Claire Eddington referred to at the beginning, as we went along. So we worked with the cohort and we interviewed them. We tried to work out some of the answers to these questions. The traditional role of the producer had begun to shift, I think, in the beginning years of this century, and we might mark the 2007 as a significant year in the history of the producer because it was when a woman called Kate Tyndall produced a book called Alchemists of the Impossible that was very influential in our work and the work that we do with Watershed, where she highlighted why it is that producers are these background figures who never actually get the attention that they perhaps deserve, because the attention is given to the so-called talent, the auteur, the director, the performer, the musician, and so on. But it's the producers that actually make everything possible in cultural industries. However, as time has gone on in this century, we've seen the way that the idea of creativity has gained more and more weight. It's now an industrialized concept that's supposed to drive growth and sustainability, competitive advantage and quality of life. The World Economic Forum says that creativity is one of the 3 most important skills for every nation's future growth. So if creativity is freighted with the weight of this new economic development imperative, however, it is less celebrated in policy circles as an agent of change. And this emphasis upon economic development through creativity leads to a certain kind of regeneration initiative which produces gentrification, or it leads to that very narrow version of the smart city, which is using all the kinds of amazing digital technologies that we have for the very instrumental means of making sure that the buses run on time. Not that having buses running on time is a bad idea, but there's so many other more exciting things we can do with technology. So fundamental to CPI was an exploration of how this distinctive kind of cultural professional could affect city change. Problems like climate change, global inequality, social division, displacement, and militarization are among the many challenges being played out at the level of the city. And now, of course, we add to that COVID-19, highlighting our division and our fragile social fabrics, as well as the opposite of those things in many cases too. So in this context, the creative and cultural work is mobilized in lots of different sites for regeneration, for innovation, for health and well-being, for tourism, for education, for social innovation, for sustainability. If we start to really think about that full range of sites where creativity is, as it were, required to have an impact, then a whole set of stakeholders need to be mobilized, a whole set of different people. And it's here that we begin to understand, I think, why the role of creative producer is an idea whose time has come. The idea of the creative producer working within, as Letty suggested, complicated networks where participatory practices, political change, creative work, technology, and innovation all intersect with these different kinds of stakeholders. To make creative work that has an impact socially requires a lot of different kinds of networks, which might be governmental networks, they might be third sector networks, they might be educational, technological, or cultural networks. And to do this kind of work needs a kind of professional person who is able to pull together these different kinds of networks and actually turn them into something that creates impact and experiences for people in the way that Letty and Kate have already described. So the reason that the idea of the creative producer has developed at this moment in time is because there are more and more people who want to do creative work that engage in ever widening range of stakeholders in order to produce change in the world. Every one of these stakeholders has their own social and political ecosystem, and these systems exchange and produce distinctive values. In this complex world of interconnected stakeholder networks, the creative producer is able to understand those values and the flow of those values and communicate with them in a way that produces things that make the world different. To do that, they need to have leadership, they need to be flexible, they need to be tenacious, they need to connect people and communities, and they need to have great care around the way they communicate and the way they manage their communication. In our sample group, the cohort that we were working with, most of these producers had got a creative practice of their own in their lives and in their background. They understood the rhythm and the tension and the experimental nature of creative production. So they had that as a foundation in some way. These are also people who are profoundly interested, as we've heard again from Letty and Kate, about working with place. The creative producers in our sample have been self-selected to be committed to place. The work they want to do is by and for particular people in particular locations. And the creative producer works with memory, cultural identity to strengthen citizen belonging and empowerment with certain kinds of places. These producers are also people that are in some profoundly way relational. What they do is manage relationships. And managing relationships is key to all this. Being able to build and care for and maintain relationships is crucial. The producers often spoke to us about having to find the key people in those networks who could mobilize things and then be able to look after them by understanding what it was that they needed out of the system at any given point in time. So very skilled people at actually managing those kinds of relationships. And of course, therefore, very skilled at being communicative, at being able to be fantastic communicators, being the nodes in the network where all the information flows through them and goes through them. These cohort of producers were also good at being risky. This work involves risk. It involves direct political risk. As Letitia was saying, in the context of Mexico and working on the streets, working with children, that itself is a political act and it's dangerous in that context. We had other producers from other parts of the world where that was completely something that was different to the European context that we really had to bear in mind. This is not just risky creatively, this is actually risky personally and politically, and you could finish up in jail or worse. So they're brave and they're good at taking risks. These producers are also advocates. They're good at selling. They have to sell all of this stuff. They have to sell the idea. They have to sell the talent to the funders. They have to sell the funders to the community. There's a lot of sales and advocacy that goes on in this role. So they're very, very multifaceted people with all this range of skills that they're mobilizing. And I guess I wanted to just finish up by saying these things are often in tension. It would be a shame if we came out of this project thinking, oh, creative producers, we know what they are now. We've got that nailed. Here's the job description. Here's the career path. Here's the salary level. Actually, I think it's really important that the idea of the creative producer is kept open, and we appreciate that being a creative producer is about being experimental. And that when we run experiments, we don't know what's going to happen. That's the point of the experiment. If you knew what was going to happen, you wouldn't do it. The point of being experimental is to try to make something new happen in the world. And that involves risk, and it involves holding the contradictions together and actually not being sure exactly what's going to happen before you start out on the journey. And that feels like a very important part of being a creative producer, and one that I hope that we can carry into the future, and that this cohort can start to grow and continue to grow, make other connections, and that together with their partners, we can start to build a global network for this kind of work, which I think, as others have already said before me, has enormous potential and is really needed in the world right now. So thanks for inviting me on the ride. It's been fantastic, and I really look forward to seeing what you get up to in the next couple of years.
John, thank you so much. There is so much there that I want to seize hold of, ask lots of questions of, but I've got to hold all those because we do have Malika I'm excited about, and we're going to go straight over to her, who is in traffic in the car in Nigeria right now. Malika, can you hear us? Are you there?
Yes, I am here and I can hear you, and I hope you can hear me. Yes. So thank you very much, and I really do hope that you guys would be able to hear me. I am in traffic in the car trying to make a journey that is usually approximately 20 to 25 minutes, but has taken me over 2 hours. And this is the reality of my situation living in a city like Lagos, which is one of the most densely populated cities in the world. But also a city that is riddled with social and economic issues, as well as really institutions that are not necessarily functioning. And it is in this through this lens that I decided to actually apply to become a creative producer, because my entire raison d'etre has been around how do I solve problems in a context that is constantly riddled with problems. And these problems were smoldering me and they were choking me. And I needed a space to be able to leave the space I was in, which is in Lagos, and go out and explore solutions, a space that allowed for solutions. Um, I was recommended to this project and someone asked me to apply. And I remember thinking to myself, I have no clue what a creative producer is. I knew what it meant from that context, but for my own life and me as a person working in running a creative agency at the time in Lagos, it's a producer is what you use for the film industry. We don't use it to talk about a person that is as dynamic as what I would come to understand a creative producer to be. And so imagine me getting through to the CPI and then my first week in this program, and I'm thinking every single day, what am I doing here? And it is interesting because the what am I doing here would become answered because of the 14 other people that were around me. These are 14 people who in themselves were questioning the idea of am I a creative producer? Am I a cultural producer? What am I? And because when you come from a country that has been colonized, there's some sort of a complex that you have coming into a space with other people who were some not colonized or were the colonizers, and thinking, would I be able to express myself in this space? Will I be heard? Will I be seen? Will people make assumptions of me? And it was something. It was sort of like a consideration that kept on going in my mind as I was going to the space. But then, these were people who, at the same time, were having these same vulnerabilities. And one of the biggest things we're feeling almost like imposters in a lot of the things that they were doing. And I was there thinking, all the problems that I brought with me to Lagos to this space were following me, and they were my reality. And I would remember the conversations I would have with Letty from Mexico and say, oh wait, am I from Mexico? Or are you from Lagos? Because there were such similarities between our situations. And I'll have conversations with Michelle from Ireland who would say to me, Malika, you need to slow down. You need to just like take things in. And I'll say, no, Michelle, I want to, but no one has taught me how to stop, because I'm constantly in a space that is functioning from scarcity, and I need to explain to you that I need to actually remind myself that, it's okay not to always be hustling for something or in a rush, because that's what your reality is talking about. And all these other interesting conversations that will have an impact in my life, like thinking about my own self-care, my own well-being. And what this will then do over the course of the 2 years is give me an opportunity to reflect very seriously on what the change I wanted to make in my own city, in my own country, and how, because of these big burdened problems that I constantly took upon myself, I in myself became burdened just because of those. And what the opportunity the CPI gave me was a space to think, a space to breathe, a space to allow myself to transition to become who I was always meant to be. And after my first year and having said, okay, I thought the 3 weeks in the initial 3 weeks of orientation was going to be too long, but it ended up actually being too short. And I would go back to the pervasive media studio and sit in the studio on the desk and then go after this idea that I had, which was around how do we prototype solutions in Lagos, essentially. And I being in the studio space, I got the support I needed. I was able to bounce these ideas off people. And later then came back to Nigeria and said, oh, I'm ready. I have an idea now, and I'm going to start a design or co-design business, and this is what we're going to do, and this is how we're going to solve problems. The people in Nigeria were not interested in my solutions. They didn't want to know about these complex, very ideas that I was bringing with me from wherever I came from. But what I quickly learned was that whatever the case may be, that as a person who has been in a space of complete exploration and just having the freedom to think, I now understood that this idea of problems needed to be very simplified very, very quickly, and impact needed to be understood within the context of individuals as opposed to overall societal impact. Like, this is the change I needed to have. And this then led to me setting up my own consultancy called Made Culture. And simply put, when someone asked me what is social development consultancy, working with people and organizations to solve Africa's most pressing problem, I understood my role in Nigeria was to work with, whether it was at an individual level or whether it was at a macro level, work with people to create impact. And with everything that has happened and everything that is constantly happening in Nigeria and now around the world, one of the things that we have now become as an organization is to say, how do we build on evidence? Everything that we do has to be built on evidence, because if we cannot measure it, if we cannot see it, if we don't know how it's working, then it didn't happen. And so coming back to that initial question of who is a creative producer, what is the role of the creative producer within the context of Lagos, for example, where the word creative producer is still something I cannot even utter or call myself. And a lot of those kind of like words have been used today to say someone who is resilient, someone who is dynamic, someone who is sitting in a car in Lagos traffic and saying that I'm going to have this conversation with all of you. That is the role of a creative producer. We are flexible and we are very, very relevant to the future of our cities. And I want to take this opportunity to say thank you to everybody that has been a part of this journey, everyone that has given me the opportunity, and I don't just mean in terms of the Watershed alone, but all of the creative producers who I am very, very deeply, in a way, indebted to, because they showed me themselves. They opened up to me and showed me that regardless of your race, regardless of your background, regardless of where you come from, that we are all the same. We have the same kind of issues. We sleep, we breathe, we cry, we're just human beings. And at the end of it all, that is what a creative producer is. A creative producer is someone who wants to make the world a better place, whether it's for themselves or for other people. And I just want to say thank you to everyone that I have met through this journey. And if you ask me, am I a creative producer? I still cannot answer that question. But I can tell you that the opportunity that the CPI has given me has been one in which I have been able to truly, truly find myself and find my agency, so that I am able to actually create the opportunities for change that have been plaguing me as a Nigerian. Thank you. And I hope you could all hear me.
Malika, what an extraordinary testimony to what this has meant to you. I love that phrase, that it gave you the space to become the person who you would always meant to be. And I know that a lot of the creative producers watching and part of this program feel the same, the space to breathe. I think, Letty, you agree. So now we have an opportunity for a pause, for a chat, for meeting people who you haven't met before. There is a networking facility, so you will have been emailed a login link for that. There is also a sign-up form in the chat if you haven't been emailed that. That allows you to have a networking opportunity of a one-to-one. Now, this isn't signed or has captions, so if you don't want to do that, you can stay here and carry on the chat in the YouTube chat. And we will be back online in about 20 minutes, so at 5:15 we will reconvene, and at that point we are going to have a Q&A with John and one of the other producers and Claire. And what would be really brilliant is if you could start posting your questions in the YouTube chat so that we have a sense of what it is you'd like to explore with them. There's so much there to get your teeth into. So we'll see you again at 5:15. Thanks. Welcome back, everybody. We've really enjoyed seeing your discussions and your chat, and I hope those of you that were in network were having some really brilliant conversations. So we now have a discussion with Malika and John and Claire Reddington, and we're going to be focusing on some of your questions that are coming up. So please keep posting them in the YouTube chat as we go along. I wonder if we could start with everybody maybe thinking about what changed for you in the 3 years of this CPI program, from when you began the program, your hopes and thoughts about what creative producers are and do, to this moment as we come out of lockdown and we're in a pandemic. So what for you has changed in your understandings of what a creative producer does? Claire, I wonder if I can come to you first.
Yeah, certainly. And I guess the reflection for Watershed is, what did we set out to do with the programme, and did it live up to it? And one of the massive inspirations and kind of catalysts for Watershed thinking about this programme was that we were making work around playable cities. So commissioning artists, touring them around the world, largely in partnership with British Council. And we were really clear that we didn't ever want to parachute into places and to kind of to spam cities with work. We wanted to work in collaboration with local creative producers, but we often had trouble finding them, not because they weren't there, but because, as other people have said, they weren't self-identifying under that banner. So what we were keen to do was to create a global network of people that we could collaborate with, and we thought that it would create a lot more art than I guess we ended up. We thought that we would be commissioning artists to make work in collaboration with producers across the world, and actually the producers that came forward were very much more activist than Watershed has ever entered into a program with. Community activism, sort of overt political activism, lobbying, really a lot of people who are also outside of the art world, problematizing some of its power structures and some of its ways of thinking about work, especially around sort of emerging and developing economies. And so we learned so much more than we thought that we ever would around the kind of work that we wanted to make, what questions we should ask ourselves, and how we wanted to become more activist around playable city and privilege and who has permission to play. So I guess for us, that's the real way it changed. We do have that network for sure, but I think the type of work we're making is really different.
That's super interesting, and also reflects I think something that's been happening within creative practice itself, in it becoming baggier, more interdisciplinary, more connected into activism and politics, particularly in the acceleration of Black Lives Matter in the last 6 months, I would say, and Extinction Rebellion. Is that something you recognise, Malika? You described in your presentation that sense of legitimising what you do and beginning to be able to describe what you do. Was that a sort of similar reflection you had on the programme?
I think for myself, I'll speak for myself, but I think a lot of producers can relate to this. I would go to the part, the word that Letty used, and I also really, really resonated very strongly with, was that word, imposter syndrome. You want to do something as a creative producer, I wouldn't say the word creative producers. You just want to do something as maybe an activist or somebody who is just seeing the problems, thinking, what gives me the right to do this thing? And it's like you then meet a network that then says to you, all of us are thinking about change in our city. And therefore, if we are all thinking about the same thing and want to do these things, then that gives us the right, because there are problems around us and somebody needs to start solving those problems. And if not us, who? And I think for me, when you asked me the question about the change or the transformations that happen, was that ability to say, okay, yes, I can be the one that is trying to make that change happen. And the support and the network, and that was possible because it wasn't just you that was seeking to be the part of the solution, was actually trying to do the same. So I think for me, it can be a part of the solution, and that solution didn't need to be super big. Yeah. I think that for me was the biggest sort of like transformation for me.
Yeah. John, just reflecting on that idea of being part of the solution, and is that something that you saw? You know, what happens as a result of international global connections and joining up these producers then? What did you see happening as a result of these new relationships that were being formed as part of the programme?
Well, a kind of explosion of solidarity, by which I mean recognition, as people have spoken about before. Oh, you're a bit like we share things. We're really in different places and in different contexts, but we share so much motivation and practice and problems, and therefore a real confirmation of the idea that the creative producer as being this change agent within these networks in cities seems like a really valid kind of idea. So we'd been kind of working with that notion with Watershed as the creative producer before this program started, and we'd kind of been experimenting with our own little world, in our own lab world. So this gave us an opportunity to really kind of try and take this out, and actually in a way that met many kind of challenges on the way in that journey, because we were reminded of the specificity of where it was that idea came from, and the particular kind of power modalities involved in that context. But then we went through a whole process, I think, of kind of going, well, actually underneath that there are some really common things and some common approaches that are valuable to hold on to. I think one of the things that was interesting for me in learning about the program was, I think we kind of thought it might have more technology involved in it than it did in the end. I mean, I think the Playable Cities program that it grew out of had a kind of an idea built into it that the kind of technologies that shape our urban lives could be reconfigured through citizen engagement. And although technology was present in some of the work, it didn't stay in the middle of it stayed in the middle of the work. I don't know what Malika and Claire feel about that, but that was my sense. I sort of expected it to be more about technology in urban systems, and actually it kind of wasn't. They became just part of the fabric of urban life, along with many others to do with like traffic management in Lagos, for instance, or much more fundamental things.
I'm wondering in that, Claire or Malika, there's a number of questions in the chat about citizen engagement, and it's interesting that reflection around that switch of technology becoming a kind of support structure or mechanism rather than perhaps the organizing principle of producing. Is that something that you've begun to see in terms of, as you've described it, Claire, activism becoming a kind of really clear organizing principle in terms of objective of these producers?
I think it reflects actually the wider breadth of backgrounds that we invited into the cohort, perhaps more, because I guess if you look across activism and movements like Extinction Rebellion, actually their use of technology to organize and to distribute meaning and impact is huge. I guess one of the projects that we funded that came out of this program was Russell's work, working in Durban, and he kind of came to Bristol connected with ambient literature, or a group of people looking at how to deliver storytelling spatially, geographically, using mobile phones, and took that back to Durban and used it as a way to engage with the kind of Black male city experience in Durban and in South Africa. And that was a real perfect coming together of where form delivered against the real needs and the meanings and the messages that Russell was trying to get through. And I think there's something interesting around particularly how emerging technologies as a tool are able to be kind of bent and appropriated for that kind of activism or for that kind of meaning making. But I think it was also refreshing to understand that that Anel, working in Kazakhstan with communities in the side of a housing estate, has a pretty different relationship with technology, and so that isn't the organizing principle that resonated with everybody.
That makes a lot of sense. And Malaika, can I come to you with a question that's coming up around relationship to city governance and speaking to power and your agency as a creative producer? Could you talk to us about what your journey in that, and on what how you respond to the situations of power and systemic power within Lagos?
So I think that I want to use the Meet at the Square project, which was also part of the CPI project, because what we were trying to do was look at how we can bring together different kinds of people within the city, so from people within the community, but within that community, also what understanding and identifying the hierarchical systems that existed within that community, and then beyond that, then also then seeing how we could bring the government into that conversation as well. And the premise behind that was, how do we look at community aspiration, community ownership, and just placemaking as an idea, and particularly in light of the fact that we didn't have a lot of public space, was something that wasn't something that people read on the streets, but people don't feel like they own public space, so it's something that they have access to. And
I think Malaika's connection is a little rough. Do you want to try turning off your video so that we can hear you on audio? Would that be okay? Terrific.
Is that a little better?
Yes.
That better?
Yes, we can hear you a bit better.
Okay, so I was talking about the Meet at the Square project that was supported by was part of the CPI project. And the premise behind that project was, how can we explore conversations around community aspiration, community interaction, and as a community wellness, but then also bringing in placemaking into that conversation, just because people don't necessarily talk about public space as something that they have access to, or it's just more of a place where you walk, or where you get the bus, or or how you get from one place to another. We really wanted to explore the idea of unity. And in trying to do that, we also had to bring in different stakeholders. And within the community, there are these hierarchical structures that are in place as well. And we knew that to design the project, we needed to speak to everybody and understand what their own what their own understanding of public space and meant to them. And we also had to go at some point to the government as well, and bring in the government to this idea that we had. And we created Meet at the Square. And Meet at the Square was, we were asking people if you could, we created a public space gallery, and we said, can you write or draw the meaning of community to you? Do anything, write, draw, act it out, whatever. And we were going to observe how people behaved. And within that space, you would see the different power structures come together, in that the government, when we went to speak to them, the local government, and asked them about, and told them about this idea that they had, we would have conversations with them about, are we recording it? Is there going to be documentation? Where is this documentation going to go? It wasn't necessarily about the idea of what is this project trying to do. And the members of the community, you would have the average man and woman who would say to us, okay, we like the idea, but we don't really understand it, but we want to participate. And when the moment came, they were the ones that that benefited the most from the idea and benefited the most from the project. And then when the authorities came, they would look at it and they would say, oh, please make sure that I'm in the video, make sure that I get credit for having supported it and attended it. And they came because they heard about it. And then you had the community members, like the chiefs and the people from the church, all of who would come to that space and I think for me, what it was an interesting way for us to see how power dynamics worked in that space, because the government or the people in authority wanted to be a part of something that they didn't necessarily support, or wanted to be a part of something that they didn't get involved in, but when it was happening, could see the benefit of it, and then said to us that, oh, you know, we would like to support you in this way or that way. And maybe I don't think I've necessarily answered the question from a point of agency and power. But I think for me, what was interesting about that experience was the way in which people were able to, as a community member, understand that this community is our own. So they took ownership of that process. And they found agency in the sense of that interaction with one another, and how the power dynamics that existed were also displayed within that space, where the government were not necessarily in support of it at the beginning because they didn't understand it, and went ahead to even create, to gatekeep my ability to make this thing a success. But when it did happen, wanted to come back and take ownership of it and claim it as theirs, to the extent of saying in the video, they wanted to be seen in this light. So I think that's kind of an interesting way to sort of like, that's an interesting thing that the project kind of highlighted to us.
I really like that sense of how something unfolds and how your agency changes as the kind of ownership gets exchanged, the success of the project emerges, and city authorities kind of want to take on that as that credit in a way. That's interesting, isn't it, how that unfolds? I'm gonna bring in Letty now into the conversation. Letty, I wonder if we could ask you about your relationship to city governance in Mexico City. And I know that you and Malaika have found some sort of common ground there in terms of very similar kinds of city experiences, but at the same time, quite stark differences in how you work. Could you talk to that idea of how you talk to power and how you negotiate those kinds of systems?
So yes, thank you. So as I mentioned in my presentation, I used to be part of the Lab for the City, which was kind of the experimental area of Mexico City's government. And from that, I was leading the Playful City strategy, which at the beginning started as a whole of like, how can play and children's perspective have an impact on policy design, but also urban design. So it was a kind of a whole challenge. And I think a lot of what I did during my 4 years as part of Mexico City's government was a lot of like talking to people about what it was. And one thing that we need to understand is that the Lab of the City was this kind of entity in between. So we were not civil society enough for politicians, but we were not political enough for the government. So it was difficult to be in that, again, liminal space, but it was one of the good things that we were able to have, because then we had the opportunity to talk both ways. And we had the opportunity just to connect them, not just through us, but to make them work together. So for us, and for me especially as well, it was about democratizing governance. So instead of like just being in these high spheres and these silos that we don't know, or at least this is how it is in Mexico, that we don't know what's happening and how the decisions are making. It was about bringing the decisions to the ground and just like creating dialogue with the communities, and in my experience with children as well, and bring their voices into the conversation and just create alliances and also create common ground. So then no one would feel cheated, and then people will be part of the change that they wanted to see as well. Because we all know that, you know, the people in the communities are the ones that have the true and the real answers of the big challenges in the cities. So we need to start talking with small communities. We need to be working on the ground.
Yeah, it reminds me a lot of Maurizio, who runs the agency in Rio, and he talks about the co-creation, you know, and in the UK, the approach of co-creating work with communities and citizens is becoming more and more accepted and mainstream. One of the things I've been intrigued by as I've watched that happen over the last 20 years or so has been that there's a danger of a kind of orthodoxy of the kinds of projects that result from co-creation. And I'm wondering whether that's something that you might have found, Claire or Letty, in terms of the kinds of work that you want to see emerge from co-creative processes. And I guess the question for me is a spiky question, is where's the room for very different kinds of artists and very different approaches? Do you think there's a danger in this kind of work that involves co-creation of it starting to have the same tone and same form at all?
Maybe Claire, you wouldn't say this, but I guess I would point to the work that you've been involved in as suggesting not. And I know that one of the things that happened during our first Bristol Lab for Creative Producers International was Claire came and talked about the new rules and the way that situations had been challenging the notion of what is public art, what is co-production. And I think very much that pointed to it, but also I guess that the work that we commissioned in Creative Producers International, which I think is actually a tiny part of what the end impact will be, because I think most of the work from Creative Producers International has, of course, not even been made yet. It's about a kind of direction of travel. But if you look at the differences between Russell's work and his real kind of emphasis on storytelling and place and geographical specificity, with the work that Malaika was doing, in that kind of part of Lagos where she was making a space for communities to come in. Sure, there are similarities, but I don't think that there's necessarily a kind of woolly community art aesthetic that we might fear or point to. And I think actually the moving away from, I think, as you would say, the baubles of public art and the kind of the flashy statues, actually, and of course talking about statues might also be interesting right now, is important in itself. So even if we are in a moment of transition where we make space for new kinds of authorship, perhaps that's just part of the journey that we're going through. I noticed that Mark Lever, who was really involved in Playable City, had put in a chat in YouTube about how at the beginning of Playable City, we talked about work that unlocked social dialogue as a kind of side benefit, that we tried to create things that started a conversation, but we were very nervous about talking about city change and about what you could expect to gain through this work. And actually that's become much clearer through the work of people like Kate, Letty, Malaika, teaching us that, okay, it might not be the kinds of art that you're talking about, but actually it's creativity and social impact. And perhaps that's different.
Yeah, that's super interesting also in terms of, I almost hi Lagos. I feel like also that it's about time for the media, major funders and city authorities to catch up on that. I don't know if that's something, John, you recognize as well, but it almost feels like we're looking for a language to describe the kind of work we're describing, which is embedded, interdisciplinary, experimental, and somehow, certainly in my case, whenever I'm talking to a commissioner about public art, they start with usually a Gormley or a bauble. And it's kind of it's still, after 20 years, takes time to kind of shift that language and expectation of what artists might bring to that situation. Is that something you recognize, John? It needs to happen?
It's certainly something that I recognize, Claire, yeah. And I mean, actually, in fact, believe it or not, one of my very first engagements with the whole world of creativity was very shortly after university, finding myself on the lawn outside St James's Piccadilly protesting against the Arts Council because they refused to fund community art at all at that point. This was in like 1980. You couldn't get money out of the Arts Council to do something that was classified as community art. So I'm afraid it's a very long story in my life. And actually what I feel is really amazing and beautiful is that actually so that's like 40 years of practice that I've been involved with, and still it's growing and it's getting bigger and it's getting stronger and it's getting more and more and more, because this idea about socially engaged practice, which is now nearly all the artists I meet call themselves socially engaged. I don't know whether they are or not, but they call themselves that. So these things take a really long time to get away from the Renaissance and the Victorian period to something which is where art is genuinely something that's occurring in people's daily lives, and creativity is there. And we don't have the language for it at all. And wouldn't it be great to actually have a kind of a global conversation that was like a lobby the media conversation, to give them the tools and the ideas and the concepts and some objects, because they love objects, to actually talk about what this work is, because as you say, that language exists entirely outside the realm of the gallery, the realm of the critical world, all that realm of art with a capital A. This work's going on, growing really strong alongside it, but completely, more or less completely unrecognized by it. I mean, there are some examples, there are some notable examples.
Also outside of traditional markets, isn't it?
Yeah.
And that, I mean, there are markets involved in it, of course, like the creative economy being one. But, you know, I think that's the other thing that's interesting in relation to, for example, it doesn't involve the art market. It's not connected into that kind of world that requires that kind of level of public value. So it's interesting in terms of how we ascribe value to this kind of work, as well as the storytelling behind it. Sorry, Claire. Yeah.
I was just thinking that one of the things that made me really think about around next steps around is how we connect those communities to each other better, because what we've done is kind of created spaces for community engagement, and lots of them, and we've connected producers to each other and they've learned. But what I'm excited, I guess, we've just finished a pilot of something called the Bristol Arts Channel, where we worked with cultural companies and organizations across the city to help them develop digital content online during lockdown. And one of the things was about how we shared audiences. And of course, I think actually taking some of the creative producers network forward in how do we think about hybrid cultural experiences which happen online and physically now. And how do we share audiences? Letty, did you ever do your joint party with Anel in Kazakhstan? Because something really beautiful happened when Letty and Anel realized that the communities of kids that they were working with had such similarities that they thought about running a joint birthday party. Did that happen?
No, we didn't manage. It was a bit too complicated because of time and technology. So no, we didn't manage. But yeah.
Isn't it interesting that lockdown has taught us that actually time and technology is much less of a problem than I think it was? And so now, if we were thinking about the Creative Producers Network, we'd be thinking about where are the commonalities, what are the issues that are the same across people, and how do we think really differently about that hybrid potential going forward? I think we're really, obviously, like all cultural organizations, like producers, worried about international collaboration right now. How will we do it?
You wonder whether or not it's what we're going to see is an acceleration of what was to happen.
Yes.
So in terms of the decisions we would have had to make around reducing flying, around international touring, that actually that's kind of come now, 5 years early maybe, and that part of that problem is we don't quite have the tools to know what to do with that. But I think, you know, CPI is an example of that, giving you that template to know what to do. I wonder, as we've got a couple of minutes before we close off the Q&A, I'll keep my eye if there's any burning questions that come up right now. But I wonder whether there's Letty and Malaika, you might talk to what next. What are you going to hold on to from this program as you go forward and think about the conditions that you need to be the best producer that you can be, that you've always wanted to be, in terms of taking forward the kind of hope from this programme about how you might work together? Letty.
Wow, no pressure there. I guess, like I mentioned, I think one of the best things of this was, and we had the conversation between all of us, that we just kind of became this super powerful creative producer. So we are just, like Claire said, we're just one phone call away, one Zoom call away, one WhatsApp message away. And it's just, it can be done at any time, at any day of the week. So I think that is one of the most precious things that I take from this. And I will include Joe and Pete and Claire and everyone into that. But also to take it forward, I think it'll be just keep clapping for each other's projects, each other's work, each other's activism, and just, you know, keep pushing and keep, we say here cacareando, but like just keep talking about it. And learning from each other. I think in the current situation of the world, it's more precious than ever that we learn from each other. And then if we see the wave coming, we can learn, and we need to be resilient immediately. We don't have to be, you know, in meetings with government authorities, and that will take ages. We need to be working with communities. We need to be activating people. We need to be understanding our capital culture, our social capital in our neighborhoods. And we, the creative producers, need to be part of that change, and we need to be part of that social capital in our cities and in our neighborhoods, because sometimes we do projects, amazing projects in other parts, and then we don't start with our own neighborhoods. So I would say that, just keep being resilient and push forward.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you. Malaika?
For me, I think the thing that what will happen beyond this is we've created a model that works and a model that is sustainable. This model is built around the fact that you can be one place and you can be connecting to someone in a completely different place with completely different experiences and options. And it is something that has been perpetuated beyond the actual program, because we have stayed connected. We are finding that when we have ideas, we can reach out to the person that is most likely to help nurture that idea and make it possible. And the beauty of this Creative Producers International is the model in itself. I think that's the key thing here, and that's what's going to go beyond all 15 of us, and also something that go beyond Watershed in itself. I mean, even in the way I think about my work, I don't think about it from a local perspective anymore. I understand the context is different, but I think that it is the context that allows us to thrive, because we are all learning from one another. I always say to people that, you know, just because, you know, and this is something that I was very particular about during the program, was to say, well, it's different for me because this is my experience. And I think a lot of people appreciated that about each other. It's that, okay, yes, we are trying to achieve some kind of change in our own immediate society and communities and cities, but we also are very different in terms of context. And I think that is the thing that will go beyond all of us. It's the actual CPI model. The model is the future for the CPI, for the producers, for everything. So that's what I'll say.
Yeah. Thank you. Totally agree with that. And for anyone who's live on YouTube at the moment and would like to connect in with the creative producers that have been on this program, because I know there's many more of you out there that are listening and watching, the creative producers are going to put, if they're happy to, their social media handles in the chat now, and you can connect in with them and find out about their experiences and exchange your details to create an even bigger network than the producers that were on that program. To finish up, we're coming now to Joe Lansdowne. Joe is the executive producer of Pervasive Media Studio. Joe, it's over to you.
Thanks, Claire. So, as you've heard, Creative Producers International enabled us at Watershed to reflect on the role of the producer, what they're for, what they do, and how they can be supported. We provided some money and support to begin a networked conversation about creative producing as part of City Change. We've seen how the methodology and tools in this report, which I hope you'll explore, have already been borrowed, hacked, and built into programmes in cities all over the world. We're now beginning to look forward to continuing our relationship as part of this extraordinary global network, and hope that it has indeed become a living, breathing, caring thing of its own, strong enough to adapt, thrive, and grow. In this emergent, extended set of relationships, we've been reminded, and this has come up a lot today, that the notion of creative producer must be held quite lightly. Creative producer continues to be a slippery term, understood differently across sectors, and sometimes not at all. We might talk about possible producers, or create-ish producer-like work, or producers with a very gentle P. We've come to recognise creative producing as a group of attributes and approaches that dodges any one occupational category. We're interested, above all, in their work and in the how and the why it's done. But a discussion of producing always feels valuable to me because it must pay attention to questions of power, complexity, culture, courage, value, and contradiction. Where creative producing and city change intersect, the conversation extends to include the materials of the city, the buildings, the technology, the people, the streets, the weather, and more, always in negotiation with its systems, its rules, its markets, its histories, its politics. We think it's vital to have and create space for these conversations as a core part of generating change, and we hope that our cohort continue to convene them with people who are making work that itself attends to context. So the network is growing exponentially, with our producers developing communities of friends, teams, and colleagues who have a shared language. Their work rooted in their local environment, but connected to an international set of ideas and experiences. We think that this both enables learning through difference and in comparison, but also engenders a kind of global outlook that might inspire in ways that are hard to describe or predict. Because if you're tangled up in a system that you want to change, getting a perspective on it from someone else, somewhere else, who understands how to look at systems, but has a different vantage point to your own, might shine a light on things that you can't see. Watershed itself exists in a particular context with a sets of values and methodologies. And yet the more we work internationally, the more we find that our approach resonates in unexpected places. The depth of our partnership with UE and our shared approach to research and development, knowledge production and critical practice is one that we haven't found replicated elsewhere. But together we have learned so much from the expertise and vision of practitioners from across the world. Through Creative Producers International, we have further interrogated the impact of art, play and technology in public space. We've built on existing momentum to work more inclusively and explore questions about who is allowed to participate in shared spaces, what behaviour is excluded through the design of infrastructure, who the gatekeepers are, and whose stories are being told. These are themes that we've taken forward through other programmes closer to home, thinking about digital placemaking and expanded forms of performance, for example. And we're really excited now about connecting that work back into this international conversation. As Claire said, running this programme taught us so much about working collaboratively over distance, insight that we couldn't have imagined would become as profoundly useful as it has been this year. And now we look forward to developing new forms of production and interaction that allow us to share experience over time and space. A hybrid research programme that supports both new creative work and new networks of producers to deepen their unique connection to where they are by being in dialogue with where they might be. I'm imagining a set of locally based producer-led labs happening simultaneously around the world, with participants playing in their streets and working on their screens, making quick connections at the bar and listening carefully online, engaging communities through presence and sharing audiences over distance. At Watershed, we sometimes talk about producers building corridors, passageways that connect things so that other people can more easily travel between them. As our network of producers grows, so too does the maze of routes by which to support new work. The cohort have already begun to commission artists from each other's communities, share creative products, and co-locate projects. And in a world that can feel increasingly fragmented and difficult to navigate, this approach offers us the possibility of supporting a creative response. So if that's interesting to you and you're not already part of the conversation, please do continue to follow our work together, or get in touch with one of the producers directly, and you should be able to see notes in their bios in the chat or on the notes on YouTube, but also have a look at the website itself and get in touch with them, or my contact details will be shared at the end of our event, and I'd love to hear from you directly too. Thanks.
Jo, thank you so much. What a beautiful summary of the possibility and potential of creative producers. It's been such a delight to listen to you all and to share this moment as now this report goes out into the world. You can download it. As John says, it is a feast with toolkits and ideas and tips and all sorts of knowledge to share. And I would like to thank particularly Martin O'Leary, who is behind producing this event today. So often Martin doesn't get thanked for this kind of thing, but it's really important to say he has been holding it together as we go live. So thank you, Martin. Please keep in touch, everyone. Keep producing in extraordinary ways, and we'll see you all really soon together, I hope. Goodbye.